This is the second film in a series on people who've shaped the way we think about life and about faith. All three people that we're examining saw how the church had become powerful and lost sight of the importance of people. The first film was about John Wycliffe, an English academic and pastor who lived in the 14th century, spending most of his life around Oxford. His books and pamphlets were taken across Europe by students who studied at Oxford and by other loyal disciples, and soon had an influence in other places. One of the people who was greatly influenced by John Wycliffe was Yan Hus, a Czech academic and pastor. Hus is celebrated in Prague in this great monument here for his contribution to Czech identity and literature, as well as its religious faith. To start the story, we must go 140 kilometres south of Prague, in the kingdom of Bohemia, where Yan Hus was born around 1369. His name, Yan Hus, suggests he was born in the town of Hussite, which means goose town, the town we're in now. The first written mention of this town was in 1291. The town was a trading centre on a trading route, which transported fine clothes, wines and spices and other goods for the wealthy. But the few clues left by Yan Hus about his origins suggest that his parents had no part in that. The family was very poor, living in a cramped wooden cottage with a poorly thatched roof. They had a hard dirt floor on which they slept with the farm animals. They had a small plot of land to grow some corn, potatoes and other vegetables, and they ate mostly bread, corn, pottage and vegetable gruel. The local stream provided their drinking water, but also the water for their washing and cleaning, and was highly polluted, which meant that diseases were common. It was a hard life. However, Yan Hus's mother was very pious and taught Jan how to pray. Jan went to a Latin school at a local parish church, perhaps one on the site here. He learnt to read the Bible and also take part in a choir, which led to a lifelong love of singing. At the end of his primary schooling, the family went to Prague, where he continued his education. He would earn tips singing at the church and outside it, and acting as an altar boy. However, he survived on scraps, often eating just once a day. He later described how he made a spoon from bread to eat some of the peas. He ate the peas and then the spoon. In 1390, he entered Charles University of Prague, studying in the departments of arts, philosophy and theology. He got a job as servant to Stephen of Kolin, his professor of theology and rector of the Bethlehem Chapel, and for that received a small salary. He worked hard at university and in 1393 was awarded his Bachelor of Arts, and then the following year his Bachelor of Arts in Divinity, and then 1396 his Master of Arts degree. He was not the most brilliant student, but he was diligent and hard-working, at least most of the time. At the same time, he enjoyed nice clothes when he could get some, was rather fond of drinking and gambling with his fellow students, and with girls who snuck into the boarding houses. At one service he attended, he discovered he could get forgiveness for his sins by buying an indulgence certificate, which he duly did. But he was becoming a little more interested once again in religious piety. In 1398 he was appointed as an examiner and lecturer at the Faculty of Arts as a professor of theology. He now had some students under his charge, and they were drawn to his passion and the energy in his teaching. While he was not the most senior academic, he drew a loyal following. Hus was ordained a priest in the summer of 1400, but continued to work at the university, becoming Dean of the Philosophy Department in 1401. He was also hired that year as a resident preacher at the Bethlehem Chapel. This place. The church had quickly become one of the largest churches in Europe, with well over 3,000 members. In 1402, a close friend of Hus, Jerome of Prague, gave Hus a copy of Wycliffe's works, which had been copied by hand when he was in Oxford. Yan Hus became deeply engrossed in Wycliffe's works and was impressed by Wycliffe's criticisms of indulgences, the very idea that the Pope could forgive people if they paid enough. He was also impressed by Wycliffe's translation of the Bible from Latin so that everyone could read it. Other people were also preaching about the sins of the church and of the clergy, but Hus attacked the leader of St. Michael's Church, Father Bernard, arguing with him about the inconsistencies in the church's doctrines. Hus became passionate about restoring the pure Christianity he found in the Bible and preaching for 12 years at Bethlehem Chapel. He had considerable influence, raising the ire of many clergy. He preached against the idea of easy forgiveness through indulgences, against false relics which were being displayed to attract donations, and even the oppression of the Germans. The church controlled about half of Bohemian territory and imposed high taxes, which left many people angry, including Hus. The church was ensuring the poor remained poor. There is another picture on the wall of Bethlehem Chapel, which is copied from a 15th century painting of the story from the Gospels of Jesus expelling the moneylenders from the temple in Jerusalem. For Hus, it symbolised the greed of the church of his day. It contrasts with the pictures in the chapel of the honest work of the poor. While a rector of the university published a ban prohibiting discussion of Wycliffe's ideas, Hus translated Wycliffe's Trialogus into Bohemian and disseminated it to the congregation. In 1405, Pope Innocent VII gave orders to the Archbishop of Prague to repudiate Wycliffe. But the next year, more Wycliffe texts arrived and Hus read the full manuscript of the church. At the same time, there was a growing sense of nationalism, as well as a strong desire in the country to reform the faith. King Wenceslas IV supported the nationalist sentiment and gave Hus some protection from his critics. And in 1409, Hus became the rector of the university. The Archbishop, on the other hand, ordered all Wycliffe's literature to be burned in a great bonfire. But Hus continued with his preaching and introduced new songs to put his teaching into music. Hus was branded a heretic. But meanwhile, Hus's followers held rallies in support of him. In 1412, the contender for the Pope, John XXIII, launched a campaign against Pope Gregory XII and issued indulgence certificates to pay for it. Hus and his followers riled against the indulgences and burnt the certificates they could get their hands on. 3 of Hus's followers took their objections to the indulgences into a range of churches, heckling until they were dragged out. Hus marched to the city hall with 2,000 followers to demand their release, but the 3 men were executed. Hus retrieved their bodies and buried them as martyrs at Bethlehem Chapel. There were 3 popes vying for the position at that time. John XXIII, supported by Germany, Benedict XIII, supported by France, and Gregory XII, supported by Rome. John XXIII and Benedict XIII would later be described by the Catholic Church as anti-popes. Hus had strongly opposed the issuing of indulgences by John the 23rd to support his campaign against Gregory XII. On behalf of John the 23rd, the cardinal in Prague issued an arrest warrant against Hus, demanding he appear before the Curia, the governing council of the Catholic Church, which was meeting in Constance, Switzerland. Incidentally, that council would continue in Constance for 4 years. The warrant asserted that Bethlehem Chapel, including the home of Yan Hus, which was attached to the chapel, should be razed to the ground. Hus went into hiding around December 1412 and hid in a variety of places, including here at Kozy Hradec Castle near Tabor. He moved around several times while writing a range of documents. Amongst the documents were expositions of the faith and 6 heresies of the Church. The latter included challenging the sale of indulgences for the forgiveness of sins, the idea that the church leaders could recreate Christ, the excessive veneration of the saints and of Mary, the Pope, and the idea that the Pope had superior authority over the Bible. He also challenged the imperfect nature of the priests, the papal curses of excommunication, and the sale of ecclesiastical posts, known as simony. Some of his works were written in Czech and remain important for the development of the Czech language. In 1414, Hus received a letter from Sigismund of Nuremberg, King of Germany, soon to be crowned the Holy Roman Emperor, inviting him to attend the Council of Constance. He was to be escorted by some knights and promised protection. On arrival at Constance, the knights turned on him and placed him in a dungeon, place that belonged to a Dominican monastery on an island in Lake Constance. Then he was transferred to Gottlieben Castle, Furgau in Switzerland, which belonged to the Archbishop of Constance. And he spent 73 days in frosty conditions with very little food. After several appearances at the Council of Constance, when Hus was accused of various errors, he was sent from the council to Constance Cathedral. Hus was then affixed to a stake and a fire was lit under him. It is said that Hus sang a hymn as the flames leapt around him. His ashes were dumped in the waters of the River Rhine. The followers of Jan Hus were appalled at what had happened to their leader. Many attacked the local churches and removed the priests. In 1419, one Hussite pastor led his congregation to the town hall in Prague, where they attacked several of the councillors, throwing them out of the windows. This became known as the defenestration of Prague. Shortly after that, King Wenceslas IV of Bohemia died, possibly as a result of the shock of this event. His brother, Sigismund of Nuremberg, King of Germany, who had been crowned as the Holy Roman Emperor, decided it was time to destroy the Hussites and formed a crusade. Sigismund took control of Prague, but soon the Hussites had retaken it. Between 1420 and 1434, 4 crusades were launched by Catholic forces against the Hussites. They were all repulsed at that time. The more radical Hussites built a new centre south of Prague, Tabor. They were led by Yan Hus, who proved a great tactician and able leader. The town was well fortified. The first human-constructed reservoir was built here to provide water. New armaments were manufactured. Thus, the Hussites were able to hold off Sigismund and his Catholic forces for quite some time. However, in the end, another party of Hussites joined with the Catholics to defeat the Tabor movement. The battles were partly about beliefs, but underlying that was the issue of power. It was a revolt against feudalism and the huge imbalance in wealth between the church and the nobles on the one side, over against the peasants on the other. The church had used its doctrines and pronouncements and its use of indulgences and relics to keep control of the peasants and to get them to pay for its crusades. This was the beginning of the revolt against these powers. The war took a great toll on the peasants, however, and could not be sustained. And after some divisions amongst the moderate and radical Hussites, they capitulated and sought peace with King Sigismund. Almost 100 years after the death of Jan Hus, the Catholic priest Martin Luther was reading the works of Hus and was deeply convinced of the truth of what he had taught, particularly the issues of indulgences, which the Catholic Church was still using to get money from the peasants. He nailed his 95 Theses to the door of his church, leading to a new stage in the Reformation. Yan Hus had kept the light of Wycliffe burning, contributing to the wider Reformation, which eventually swept through Northern Europe. Hus, like Wycliffe, emphasised the role of the Bible and preaching, and the idea that all people should be able to take part fully in Holy Communion. The monument to Jan Hus in Prague, which was created in 1915 by Ladislav Jan Salun for the 500th anniversary of Hus's death, also depicts something of the turmoil that resulted from his attempts at reform. While some Hussites, such as the Taborites, led by Zazika, sought to protect their community militarily, as depicted also in this tablet of 3 Hussite warriors in the Bethlehem Chapel Museum, others rejected violence. But fighting between Catholics and Hussites continued for more than 20 years. Another Czech theologian who was greatly influenced by Hus was Petr Chelchiki. He was just 25 years old when Hus was martyred, but Chelchiki rejected violence, even the government's use of capital punishment. He advocated for a total separation of the church from the state, and that the church should be the gathering of those who freely chose to commit themselves to it, and that wealth should be shared equally in the Christian community. His ideas influenced the left wing of the Reformation, with some of those ideas being adopted by the Anabaptists and eventually by the Baptist movement, now one of the largest of the Protestant denominations. One group of Hussites morphed into the Moravian Church, emphasising personal piety, and that in turn evolved into evangelical fervour, a fervour which motivated the Moravian Church to initiate the worldwide Protestant mission movement, taking the Christian faith to peoples throughout the world. The Moravians had a great impact on John Wesley and the subsequent Methodist movement. One specific contribution of Yan Hus was introducing singing into the Reformation, and his own hymns are still sung in the Moravian Church. Hus continued Wycliffe's challenge to the institutional church of his time, pointing to the Bible as the superior authority. With education and printing, people read the Bible for themselves and took the matter of faith into their own hands. This has led to a great variety of beliefs and practices, but ultimately the recognition of the equality of every person and that every person has the right to their own beliefs and practices. Principles which the democratic world takes for granted today.